Welcome back to the Maryland Family Matters podcast. My name is Jeff Trimbath, and I have the privilege of leading the Maryland Family Institute based in Annapolis, Maryland. We are so delighted to have a wonderful guest with us this afternoon. Mayra Rodriguez is here joining us from her home in Arizona. Mayra was supposed to be here in Maryland today. She was the lead speaker for our Maryland Right to Life rally, which we do every year on Lawyers Mall right in front of the State House. But due to the inclement weather that we are experiencing here in Maryland, we've had to postpone the Maryland March for Life. But that means that we get a chance to talk to you, Mayra. So we're so delighted that you've got time now to talk with us for this podcast. Welcome to Maryland Family Matters.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I wanted to be freezing right there with you. My heart's still with you all right there. I mean,
That's
I'm
great.
90 degrees in Arizona, but my heart suffering the
Yeah.
coldness.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I just wanted to start at the beginning. You know, where are you from? Where were you born and raised? Tell us about your upbringing a little bit, Mayra.
Well, I was born and raised in Mexico City. So I was
Mm,
born and raised Catholic,
yeah,
from a Catholic family. You just no other way in Mexico, right? I think we're still like 94% of the Christianity over there. So
sure.
Mexico City is a huge city. And my dream as a child was to be a doctor.
Okay. And what brought you to the U.S.? How'd you make that journey?
Well, like many immigrants, my family moved here due to security reasons. So what you
Mm,
have heard lately, it's not something new that happens in Mexico. We've been suffering that since I was a child. So
mm,
my mom wanted more safety for us, and that's why we ended up moving here. She had her own business. She could afford for us to move here. We got our
yeah.
visa, and that's how we came here in the United States back in '94.
Okay. Well, you have sort of been prominent on the pro-life kind of speaking circuit for the last several months, maybe even years. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that. You spent many, many years of your life working for an organization that for many of us, it's kind of hard to even mention that organization, Planned Parenthood. 17 years of your life. How did you end up at Planned Parenthood?
Yeah, now I call them corporation. After
Mm,
my personal experience, I no longer call them an organization, but a corporation because they certainly behave like one.
yeah.
Well, moving here from Mexico, as you can imagine, I had witnessed a lot of those horror stories about what women are suffering back in my home
Mm,
country, back in Latin American countries, right? So I just told you I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to work for women's care. That was my dream as a child, especially OBGYN department. When I
yeah.
moved to this beautiful country, I did my last year in high school. I had my high school diploma, went to community college. Of course, being a doctor was not in the books anymore, right? That's
Mm,
expensive. My
yeah.
friend worked for Planned Parenthood and I was starting my family. And I
Mm,
remember the first thing she said to me is, if you work where I work, you will have holidays off and,
uh,
weekends off. And I mean, yeah, I want to have the weekends off, the holidays off to raise my family, you know. And then also she said, and you like all that medical stuff. And I did.
mm,
And they need people who speak Spanish. Jackpot. Why? Because they help women, she said. So I
yeah.
just hit all the angles of I needed in my life, right? Be able to stay with my family, help women, help my women. She's a
Yeah.
Spanish speaking women. And that's how I started with Planned Parenthood. This is the year 2000.
And so you were there for 17 years, a variety of positions. You ended up running one or multiple clinics. You can talk about that. But the question I want to ask you with regard to the medical piece is, oftentimes we hear that Planned Parenthood specializes in offering women lots of healthcare services. So, pregnancy tests and pap smears and primary care and nutrition and all these wonderful things for women. Is that true?
Well, let me tell you, for over 15 years, I argue with people in the streets, on media, on radio interviews. We do more than abortions. I
Hmm.
work for a center that is 97% of our services. I had the script memorized. They have given it to me. They have
Yeah.
trained me on it. I went and
Yeah.
said, we do pap smear, we do STDs, we do sex education, and I start naming all the things that we do. That at
Yeah.
the end, Jeffrey, at the end, it all goes back to abortion. When did I
Huh.
open my eyes? Well, for many years, I even helped them going into Congress and advocating for them not to be defunded back then in 2016, right?
Yeah.
Because I was so good at working in the other side, the side that Planned Parenthood does so many services, right?
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
once I became the director of the abortion facility, that helped me see my eyes to really what was happening. One of the
Yeah.
very first things that shocked me was during my years as a director on a non-abortion facility, I was never given a quota. I was never
Hmm.
asked to see 10 pap smears, this many STDs. No. Whatever patients we saw, it was fine by them. If it was fine, 5, great. If it was 10, awesome, right?
Yeah.
But then as soon as I become the director of the abortion facility, now I have a quota. I have to see 45 to 50 women a year for abortions.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the first thing that shocked me. It's like, how? How is it that when you tell me that what I'm doing on the other side is 97% of our services, now I have to see here 4 times the number of patients than on the
Yeah.
non-abortion facility?
And you talk in one of your videos about the higher ups trying to get you to upsell these initial appointments that would come in for these health services. What did they want you to upsell?
Well, for starters, I was groomed, I was trained, and I trained others how to go into the Latino community, right?
Hmm.
For example, the Latino community, hey, these women, they usually care for their family, they don't care for themselves. We gotta go and tell them they need to basically deliberate them so they can take care of their bodies, hide the
Yeah.
birth control from your husband, hide your abortions from your husband. So let's say that a woman comes into the building and she's just there for an STD, and then she happens to be pregnant, then I'm gonna upsell the abortion right away. Now, did we
Right.
call it back then selling? No, of course not. They're like, I'm giving her options, right? Even though
Yeah.
she didn't even know she was pregnant, the first option she heard was abortion. And
Yeah.
especially push abortion because you have an STD. What does that mean? You don't know the person you were with. You
Mm.
don't know what kind of consequences the baby can have from your STD, all this risk involved with carrying a pregnancy when you have an STD, right? So all the reason why a woman should choose abortion in every scenario.
So it's interesting. I'm trying to envision how this actually works. The pro-abortion side talks about being pro-choice, but it sounds like the script that you were sort of incentivized to use, you didn't want the woman to actually make any other choice other than to choose abortion. Is that right?
That's right. In fact, the training I was giving to me and that I gave others because I was training coordinator for a while, it was like, okay, you have 3 options. Oh, by law, I have to tell you that you have 3 options. You see that? It's not that I want to, but by law, I'm being forced to tell you you have 3 options. You have the option to carry your pregnancy. Here's a list of places that can help you. You have the option to do an adoption. Here's a list of places that can help. But now, if you want an abortion, this is where we come in and help you.
Uh,
There's 2 types of abortion. And now we are trained and train others to literally just spend quality time talking about abortion. The other, we don't even do. So why would we even talk about it? We're forced
yeah.
to tell you, and that's in states like mine that used to be forced to give 3 options. In states like you, Maryland, they don't even have to. They don't have to mention the other 2 options. So
Right.
basically, their whole business is abortion, and that's all they give a women, the option of abortion. Because as soon as a woman says, I think I may carry my pregnancy to full term. Well, we cannot help you with that. Bye.
That's it. Wow. And there's big money that is pushing you
Yes.
to get them into that option. Is that right?
Well, yes. At Planned Parenthood, it's not like we get any bonuses, because they still call themselves nonprofit, and God
Hmm.
forbid they give bonuses to the staff, right? Of course not. But
Hmm.
the incentive. Oh, if we meet the quota, you get to have a pizza party for the staff. If you meet
Mm.
the quota this way, you get to do this. Give them gift cards, Starbucks gift cards, stuff like
Mm.
that, right? That
Mm.
is how the incentive is pushed. Now, what is the incentive towards the abortionists? I don't know, because they're the ones who literally don't want any cancellations,
Yeah.
like they will
Right.
do everything that in their power to stop a woman from canceling their appointment. So they must be getting an incentive, besides getting paid really well, right? And this is one of the things I argue with a lot of people. This is the side that you can see abortionists having Porsche and Corvettes and fancy cars. when they come to the abortion facility. There's a reason why they can
Yeah,
afford such expensive cards right away.
right away. In the script that you were rehearsing as you would deal with patients, and you got to the subject of abortion, you said we would say there are two kinds of abortion here, and so I want to talk with you about the one particular kind. I'm not sure all of our listeners would know about the popularity, the surging popularity of the second kind of abortion, the abortion pill. You talk in your videos about the abortion pill. And so the question I have for you is based on your experience working for 17 years. Um, uh, people who advocate for this, they say that the abortion pill is safe. In fact, we've had people in our state in Maryland liken it to taking Tylenol. In your opinion, Mayra, is the abortion pill safe?
Now, do you remember all those years where they claimed back alley abortions? In my opinion, the abortion pill is a back alley abortion. There's
Hmm.
nothing safe about the abortion pill, but for many years that has been the script. I have memorized the script. It's safer than taking Tylenol. It's like a period. You're gonna bleed 3 days and you'll go back to normal. When
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with Tylenol, at least Jeffrey, not in all my years at Planned Parenthood, no one ever called me and said, I think I'm dying after taking a Tylenol. No one
Yeah.
ever said that. Have you met
Yeah.
anyone says, I think I may die after taking a Tylenol?
No.
But then
No.
the amount of phone calls I received as the director of the abortion facility from women
Mm.
saying, I think I'm going to die after the abortion pill, they were daily. And not
Wow.
one phone call, multiple calls at night after abortion pill has been taken. Now imagine all that when now the abortion pill is being promoted online without even a doctor's office visit like in your state. The push of just having the pill available without even seeing a doctor.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about getting a call like that late at night, and you could hear the desperate woman on the other end of the phone. Um, was that part of your turning around from this issue? Those calls from people who were just expressing their desperation to you.
Yes, it was. So you remember I said my dream had been to be a doctor to care for women. I truly
Yeah.
wanted to care for women for many years. I truly believed. Call me naive, convenience. Sure, it was. Not seeing the truth was convenient for me. Of course it was. In my head, I thought I was helping women. I
Yeah.
thought that when I sent a woman for that abortion, her life was happily ever after. In my
Mm.
fantasy line, she's living it happily ever after. But now here I am, the director. I get to see the devastation. I get to
Yeah.
see the women in the recovery room, like in pain,
Mm.
crying, isolated, and on top of it, dropped off by their partners who never came back to pick them up. Now I
Wow.
get the phone calls in the middle of the night with women with in excruciating pain. And then
Mm.
one of the worst calls that I remember is getting the phone calls of women saying, they told me when I see this big blood clot to go and push it out on the toilet because that's what we will tell women. They still tell women that. When you feel
Mm.
that big blood clot, just push it out on the toilet, flush it, and you'll be done.
Wow.
And getting the phone call saying, it looks like a baby. What do you want me to do? I can see hands and feet. Or sometimes even them saying, I think it's even moving. Should I
Wow.
do something? And you have to tell them, I want you to throw it in the toilet and flush it. Now, when you think about that trauma inflicted on women,
Mm.
and now keep in mind that because I started at Planned Parenthood in the year 2000, I actually saw that pill come into the market and grow. What do I mean? It was first at 6 weeks gestation, now 7, then up to 9, then
Yeah.
above 10. Now we're what, 13 weeks they're pushing it?
Mm.
Like
Mm.
all those things. So if I had those phone calls around the year 2016, where it was still up to 9.5 weeks, when it's still the baby it's formed, but it's still not fully formed like it is at 13 weeks. Can you imagine what the women look at 13 weeks of gestation when that pill? And on top
Yeah.
of it, calling it like a period when in reality they're in labor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if they're so proud of the pill and they believe on it, then don't hide it, don't sugarcoat it, don't tell women it's like a period. Tell them this is how labor feels and looks like. You will be
Yes.
in labor.
Yeah. One of the areas of potential overlap that we as pro-lifers can have with folks who may be pro-abortion is the area of sex trafficking. We know that there is a connection between these two things. It continues the theme of abusing women. Those who traffic women abuse them, and then they abuse them when they're trying to deal with the consequences of that abuse, and that's where the trafficking piece comes in. And so sometimes we try to work with people on the other side of the aisle on this sex trafficking issue. But you tell the story about how you treated the whole subject of sex trafficking as a Planned Parenthood executive when you would raise this with your superiors. How does Planned Parenthood think about this whole subject of sex trafficking?
You know, publicly they say they care, right?
Yeah.
Publicly they say they care, just like they say they care for women and their employees, right? Publicly they say that, but behind the doors. So they send me to take training on how to detect sex trafficking and human trafficking and all this, which is great, right? Like every employer should do that,
Sure. Yes.
especially in the healthcare industry. And then I come back, do the training to the staff, right? And then we start getting the phone calls from the staff, like you just gave them a training. They're excited to recognize the signs they just learned in a training, right?
Yeah.
And they're like,
Yeah.
Myra, we see the same guy coming into this facility and he was just in Glendale. He came to Tempe with different women in the last month. It's
Mm.
even the same van, the same license plate, right? Bring it up to the supervisors. And I remember being told, stop watching, Law and Order. Your job is to ask them, are you safe? If they
Huh.
reply yes, that's it. That's all your diligence. That's it. That's all we have to do. All we are told to do is ask women if they're safe. To the point, Jeffrey, that I recall, there was a woman in the room and the person doing the ultrasound came out and said, I'm really worried about her. She has bruises all over her body.
Yeah.
The OBGYN, abortionist, I'm going to call her, female,
Hmm.
was around the area. And she's like, what's going on? And I said, well, it seems that the patient is showing some bruise of abuse. Well, how do you know if she doesn't like it rough? Like,
Wow.
maybe she just likes it rough. You're not here to judge her. If she tells you she's safe, that's all you should care.
Mm.
Knowing if you have a little knowledge about human trafficking and sex trafficking, you know that they have something hold against them that are forcing them to stay quiet. Probably their family. For example, I'm Mexican, so I can tell you how it works in Mexico and Latin America. Sometimes the people trafficking them has access to their family in their home countries, and they tell them, if you speak up, if you say something, they're dead.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, your entire family is dead, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So most of them don't speak up, don't say anything. So obviously, when you bring a woman into a room and all you say is, "Are you safe?" and she tells you she will say yes because the guy outside has access to her family, her
Yeah.
children, her mother, her brothers, and has threatened to kill them. So obviously, she's gonna tell you yes because she's afraid. This is why
Yeah.
we do trainings to recognize that. But what does my former employer does? Basically, oh, look at the other way. That's what I took out of that. Look the other way, you know?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
your job, to look the other way. And this is why we say that they're together. Abortion industry and human trafficking and sex trafficking go hand by hand.
That's right. That's right. Well, as we're coming to the conclusion of our time this afternoon, Myra, I'm wondering if you could just offer some perspective or some words of wisdom to those of us who are here in Maryland, a very blue state, very pro-abortion state. Um, uh, we see the horror of abortion. We want to protect life in what we do, but sometimes we feel like we don't know what else to do. And so, what would your advice be to pro-life Marylanders?
I can see how it's hard. I live in Arizona and we're becoming very blue too.
Mm.
It's
Yeah,
kind of frustrating. I can see how people can be like, is anything worth it? Anything we have done?
yeah,
My hope when people hear my testimony and my story is that people understand that no one's too far gone from God.
mm.
After 17 years in the abortion industry, I changed my heart and mind about abortion. It was watching those babies pile up on they're puzzling back together in Ziploc bags that woke me up. It was
Mm.
watching the pain on women, hearing their voices with pain that woke me up and took the blindfold off my eyes. And same thing
Mm.
with my children. You know, as you can imagine, I raised my family inside Planned Parenthood, but now I can proudly tell you that both of my kids are now pro-life, back in the
Mm.
faith, and alongside fighting with me for the pro-life movement. No one's too far gone. We have to keep our faith. You know, our faith is the strongest thing we have, and we have to keep going. We have to keep fighting, and we have to keep helping these women, and of course, not judging them. You know, like a message with love will go a lot further than any hate, than
Yeah.
any condemnation. We're not here to condemn. We're here to love them and tell them they are loved, and so is their children.
Yeah. Mayra Rodriguez, thank you for sharing your story with us here on Maryland Family Matters. Thank you for standing for life, for traveling the country to inspire us as pro-lifers. We're so grateful for your stand and how it encourages us here in Maryland. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey, and I hope I'll get to go soon to march with you guys.
Looking forward to it.